Well, we're finally here. The vehicle in number 1. 10 weeks have passed since the start of this series, which, I don't know about you guys, it doesn't feel like it's taken that long to do it. The list has really flown by for me. There have definitely been a couple of vehicles which I might have put in a different position, or on second thought I might have omitted from the list and put something else in instead. I think the two in particular for me were the Ducati 748, which, as I said a little while ago, I should have definitely put higher. That could have easily been top 10, maybe even top 5 actually, but I put it way down in 31st. That was the biggest mistake of the list. But then the second one was, funnily enough, including the MG SVR. I do like the car a lot, but on second thought, there was a vehicle that I forgot about which would have taken the place of that car, and that is the Honda DC2 Integra, but in particular the DB8 version, which is the ultra-rare 4-door version of the Integra. I love that car. It's my favourite JDM car ever, even more so than the RX-7. So those are the two biggest changes that I would have made. But for this particular vehicle, of course, it's going to be number 1. It's been number 1 since probably, I don't know, I was about 14 years old, something like that. So a decade, literally. It's been my favourite vehicle ever since I first saw it. I first saw this bike in a bike book, like a top 100 craziest bikes ever, or fastest bikes, or something like that. And I immediately fell in love with it. The moment I saw that Rolls-Royce badge on the front end, which I believe is an optional thing, I thought, well, that's cool. I didn't know Rolls-Royce made a motorbike. And of course they didn't. It's just the engine. And then I read the info about the bike, the specs about it, and I fell in love. This thing is insane. But a lot of people don't get the love that I have for the Y2K, and that's understandable. Of course, it's a very personal list. All of the cars in it are, just like anyone's top 10 would be. There are plenty of cars which people love, which are nowhere to be seen in my top 50, so it's understandable that many people wouldn't love this one. But I think one of the issues that I have with many people's opinion of the Y2K is not so much coming from the point of view of a fanboy, which is an easy thing to do, but it's more so objectively speaking, because I think a lot of people dislike the Y2K because of a very superficial reason, and that is the looks. A lot of people think that it's an ugly bike, that if you take away the frog eye headlights and the huge exhausts, it's actually pretty bland looking. And yet they probably also have a lot of love for something like a Chaparral 2J, which is exactly the same. It's very bland and boxy looking. I personally still love the way it looks, but that's the key. It looks like that for a reason. It's not a case of, oh, we'll make a bland-looking machine. No, it serves a purpose. The Chaparral, as I covered in that episode, is a car which I have such a huge amount of love and respect for, because in effect, it went so far in its pursuit of its goal that it sacrificed what most people find important. Looks. It completely sacrificed that and put it to one side. So does the Y2K. This is the Chaparral 2J of the bike world. Something that is so far ahead of its time. I mean, it's easy to take the Y2K for granted. This is a bike which is now literally 18 years old. It debuted in the year 2000. If you can make a bike that 20 years later still feels like the future, that's pretty amazing. And that's exactly what the Y2K feels like. It sounds like a bike of the future. It has the heads-up display with the digital dash, again, like a bike of the future would have. And even the performance. Nothing even comes close to how fast the Y2K is in the bike world, and almost nothing comes close in the car world. Now, this bike, of course, is fast. That goes without saying, but my love for it goes way beyond that performance. Because, as of course you've seen with many of the vehicles on this list, I will often choose the version that's not as fast as my favourite, or even just pick vehicles that aren't as fast in general, but I just love them because I love them. Some perfect examples would be stuff like the Lincoln Continental, or way down in the list, the Daihatsu Storia Cross 4. Is it fast? Yeah, in its own way, but not compared to most of the other vehicles on the list. With this one, it happens to be the fastest production bike in history, and I don't think it will be beaten anytime soon. And it's not even in production anymore, and still nobody has beaten it. This is a 229 mile per hour bike, a B Engineering Adonis level machine in effect. But the thing is, it was still accelerating when it set that record. So it's a real shame that they didn't actually try to improve that record later on, or at least as far as I'm aware they didn't. And it's funny that it still hasn't been beaten, because I would have thought somebody would have tried. But it's not just about top speed, it's that acceleration as well. It's way beyond fast. The Y2K redefines what acceleration is. It's incredibly fast. So fast, in fact, that you don't even feel how fast you're going until you look down at the speedo. Now, one of the reasons why I love the bike so much, and in fact I would say that this is probably the number one thing that I love about the Y2K so much, is that it exists. This bike should not exist, because think about it. What has the history of the automobile and the motorbike taught us, if not that gas turbines don't work? They've tried so many times to make turbines work in the racing world on a production scale, time and time again, be it Lotus, Rover BRM, even something massive like Toyota, various other companies. They've tried and failed over and over again to make turbines a viable production thing, but they never can. In the racing world, why does the Howmet TX stand out so much? Because it was the only one of its kind to win a race. It actually made it work. And even the Howmet had troubles. It broke down on various occasions. It had to have repairs. Now, of course, conventional race cars break down as well, so that's not saying too much, but the reason why that stands out is because it was such an achievement. And yet the Y2K, love it or hate it, this really is one of those vehicles that you have to just put personal opinion to one side and view it using your intelligent brain. View this bike through your engineering eyeball. That's the way it has to be viewed. It's got nothing to do with fandom. Even if you hate the Y2K's appearance, you have to admit, the fact that this thing even works and is road legal is a feat that I would easily put on par with the Veyron, if not far greater, because, as I said, history has proven that gas turbines are not worth the effort, and yet Marine Turbine Technologies thought, why not? We're going to do it. A company which had never built a car before, which had never built a bike before. They take out aero engines from helicopters, which are not allowed in the air anymore because of safety reasons, and then they refurbish them and repurpose them for use in other things. I believe they put them in speedboats sometimes, use them for high-powered fire hydrants or fire trucks, but they'd never built anything like this before. Not only did they build it, they built it. They engineered the heck out of this thing. It's one of the most remarkably put together vehicles ever. Aluminium frame, carbon fiber body. It still only weighs about the same as the Ducati 748, about 200 kilos, and yet it's putting out 320 horsepower at the crank, 286 at the wheel, in excess of 420 pound-feet of torque. You've got an engine which idles at a Formula One car's red line. 20,000 RPM. This thing cruises at 40,000. It peaks power at 52,000 RPM, and it just so happens to redline at 60,000 RPM. And yet, tying into that, it happens to be one of the easiest bikes to ride. That is one of the most common consensuses from people who have ridden a Y2K and actually road tested it, which isn't an easy thing to do given that there are only 17 of them in existence, at least the initial run. Another company bought the production rights for it, and they're trying to make even faster ones, I believe with up to 700 horsepower, because of course the last thing this bike needed was more power. But still, they made this machine which can run on anything that burns, but regular pump diesel happens to be the most efficient. Now, to say it's efficient is a joke. This thing can burn through 9 gallons of diesel, which in other words is the entire tank, in 20 minutes around town. Because it still has its downsides. Of course it does. You cannot change the inherent way that a turbine works. They produce a huge amount of heat, They burn a massive amount of fuel, and they hate start-stop traffic. They are designed to work at peak RPM, if at all possible, because of course, you don't stop for traffic lights in a helicopter. They're designed to run at peak speed for as long as possible. But at that speed, they're bulletproof. That's the whole point. They have to be. You can't just fall out of the sky because the engine blew a bearing or something. Hence the fact that they're made by Rolls-Royce. Of course they would be. Now, there are plenty of manufacturers who do make engines like this. The Howmet, for instance, uses a Honeywell turbine. But I love the fact that they chose Rolls-Royce. An Allison Series 250 gas turbine engine is just a nice choice to be able to get on this motorbike and genuinely say, this is a Rolls-Royce engine motorbike. That's just badass, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'm not sure what Rolls-Royce themselves think of it, or at least Rolls-Royce Aerospace, which of course is a different company to the car company, but it's just such a cool machine, as far as I'm concerned. It's affordable compared to how fast it is. It was like $150,000 new. I believe the new one is like $185,000. You could even pick up a blue one, I think it was. You could still buy it last time I checked from MTT themselves, and it was like the display bike or the show bike that they used to show customers what it could do. They were selling it for like $120,000. I tell you what, if I had that money, it would be gone already. I would have bought that thing in a heartbeat, and you know I would. Because, as I said in the end of the last video, even though only one number separates the Ferrari FF in second place to this thing in first place, it's so much more than that. Because my love for the Y2K, it's an understatement to put it in first place. It really is. Because, honestly, completely honestly, if I owned all 49 of the other vehicles on this list, cars and bikes, supercars, race cars, whatever, and if the only way to own a Y2K was to sell everything else, I wouldn't even think. I would do that in a heartbeat. Even if it meant that I couldn't own anything else on the list ever again and only had the Y2K. That is the level of love that I have for this thing. It's not even a question for me. And it's more than just the fact that it did it first. Because, you know, you could feasibly make another bike that potentially does it even better. That's what they're trying to do with the new MTT 420R or the Street Fighter, which is supposed to be the next development, you could say, of the concept. But I don't love those more. Because, again, it's not just about being the fastest possible thing. It's about the purity. This is the pure essence of what a turbine bike can be. And I would say that this is the best turbine engine vehicle ever built. It's certainly the most successful, because even though the Howmet won a race, it's not a road car. They only built a couple of them. There are 17 of these Y2Ks rolling around on the street, filling up with diesel from your average gas station. That's a huge achievement to make something like that possible. And then you've got the sound. The sound alone makes me love this thing, and having heard one in person on a couple of occasions at Goodwood, I can tell you, audio recordings don't cover it. They don't even come close. This thing sounds incredible. And the heat is incredible as well. 650 degrees Celsius coming out of either exhaust pipe. I had jeans on and I was standing a good 7 or 8 feet away at Goodwood, and it still felt like through my jeans it was singeing the hairs off of my legs from the heat. It's really just one of those vehicles that, as I've said with a number of cars, it makes such a strong impression on you when you first see it, be it in a book or in person or on a video, and there are plenty of videos of this thing on YouTube performing, that it makes a massive impression on you, regardless really of if you love it or hate it. Now, on the subject of performance, which anyone who's not familiar with the bike is probably wondering how quick it is, I already covered the fact that the record is like 227 or 229, something like that. The bike has been taken faster. I believe somebody took it to 243, some claim 250, some even claim 260 on the more powerful version. That seems entirely believable, because really the only thing holding you back is whether or not you can hold on to the bike. Because obviously it's stable, it's got a very long frame that's designed for that, and it has full fairing, which makes it a lot more aerodynamic. But still, you'd probably want to be magnetically strapped to the bike at that kind of speed. But for those who are wondering, this, as I said earlier, is not just fast. The Y2K literally redefines what acceleration times look like, or at least should look like. Now, there are many people who like to think that something like a Hennessy Venom GT, or a Bugatti Chiron, or a Koenigsegg 1-to-1, the mighty acceleration monster, or even the fastest car in the world, officially, the 284 mile per hour Agera RS, they would probably like to have you believe that those cars could wipe the floor with a Y2K. I mean, at the end of the day, they've got like 4 times the power of this bike, even 5 times the power, 3 or 4 times as much torque. Now, of course, they're a lot heavier, but weight doesn't have as much of an impact on top-end speed. In fact, it can actually benefit it. It can make you more stable. So that's not necessarily an advantage in the bike's favour. In fact, the biggest advantage that the bike has from a design point of view is how physically small its aerodynamic signature is. Apart from that, the car has every advantage you would want in the case of the Hennessy, the Koenigsegg, whatever the case may be. But not only can the Y2K outrun the fastest production car in history, the Koenigsegg Agera RS, but it's not even close. The Y2K 18 years ago makes what the Koenigsegg achieved, a couple of months ago, look like child's play. Now, to give you some idea of how quick this is, a Hennessy Venom GT, which I believe is the fastest accelerating supercar from 0 to 200, can do it in 14.5 seconds. The Agera RS, which is not quite as quick but has a better top speed, does 0 to 200 in 16.7 seconds, officially. That sounds pretty good, especially when the first generation Veyron did it in, 20, 22, something like that. Yeah, that's cute. That's very cute, to be able to do 0 to 200 in 14.5 seconds. Yeah, sure, that's cute. The Y2K does 0 to 227 in 15. That's not even close. It wipes the floor with the best that the car world has to offer, and it does it with 320 horsepower. And of that 320, only 286 even gets to the road. It's an insanely fast bike. It's not even funny how much faster the bike is. And if you want to actually see how fast it is, because for some strange reason you don't see people drag racing them much, I guess it's because they don't want to be embarrassed, you can find videos of the Y2K drag racing on YouTube. But they drag race jets instead of cars. And it beats them every time, because it's that fast. So for me, as you can certainly tell, I could talk about this bike all day. I don't talk about this bike anywhere near as much as I'd love to on the channel, because most of the people here are more interested in cars, understandably so, and generally speaking, I am more of a car fan than a bike fan. Of course, only 5 bikes featured in my top 50, but this bike alone has such a huge impression on me that, I mean, yeah, of course it's first place. It's my dream vehicle, it's my favourite bike, it's my favourite vehicle. Yeah, that's about it. So, if you've been around since the start of this series, thanks for joining me on the journey of actually fully investigating my top 50, at least for 2018. And, yeah, what a way to finish. But that's it for this installment. Of course, if you are new to this episode, which would be kind of anticlimactic to start with the first place pick, but if that is the case, you can check out all of the other picks by clicking through at the end, as well as the original video with some of my honourable mentions. But that's it for this pick, and of course, I'll see you guys next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.